Hi, I'm Seamless, and I'm not sure what today is going to end up being, but it is time for a new how to bass tutorial. Today I'm going to show you how to make this sound. And this is some cool stuff. What we're looking at here is a patcher. There's some kind of visual glitch going on with 12.5, not sure what's up, but... Hi, I'm Seamless, and very quickly I'm interjecting to say that the visual glitch, quote-unquote, that was happening is actually an option, where you come in here and there's actually a view option to disable events or really anything else that you want going on here, including one to add the amount of latency any particular processing has on something if you have it on or off. Probably want to use something that creates latency. Yeah, there it is. And then it gives you the latency viewing. But I didn't know that was a thing, so that I took it to be an error. It's not. Anyway, moving on. Point is that we're looking at the bass. This first guy is a harmer, but a whole bunch of special stuff's happening because I'm involving modular stuff here. And you might be wondering, Seamless, I don't see any modular stuff in the camera angle. Why do you have a regular camera angle? Hey, isn't it a different camera angle? We'll talk about that when we get to talking about the modular stuff. Before we talk about the modular stuff, you have to understand a bit about how the routing is working here. As I just choke on myself to death. The first thing is the harmer itself. There's an A part and a B part, but the B part is not actually part of the signal coming out of harmer that we're processing into the sound that we're hearing. The actual sound that we're hearing is coming out of part A alone. And the way this is working is that one of the things that's happening is in the panning option in the envelope settings, I am panning A, hard left in this case, and B, hard right. And what this is doing is that when you look at the actual output of channel 1 here, it's going to 8.1, 8.2 with the master unlinked entirely. So this means that it's going out of FL completely and coming out of my RME 802, Fireface 802. But where this matters is because when we're talking about outputs coming out of hardware, there's left and right, but that's just really just channel 1 and 2 out of however many you might want to end up having. Case in point, I have a couple more ADATs coming out of here, 3 and 4 out of output 3, and 5 and 6 coming out of output 4. And number 2 actually has analog input 1, which is where it's going into the patch pan, which is going back around to the back of the 802 so that we can go back into FL for processing. There's stuff going on here. There's delay for some stereo imagery because I didn't feel like using the stereo outs of the actual reverb unit, even because I would require 2 of a lot of things, but just doing that digitally is fine because I'm EQing it and compressing it, processing it with all the digital accoutrement of using a digital compressor versus an analog one, especially one like Maximus. Anyway, so the left part of the left part inside harmer is basically channel 1, and that's the one that's being processed. Channel 2 is modulation, just like channel 3, 4, 5, and 6. And that's what these guys are. These are also not audio generating layers in the sense that we can't hear them, but they are generating audio in the sense of being a signal that is applied to a parameter that can accept that signal as CV, which is called control voltage, which is basically just the modulation linkage in the modular world. So let's talk about how the original sound was created. Every time I have done this video so far, because I have done a few takes of this video, I bring this fader down, and it does change the level of modulation coming out of the left side, because you can hear the stereo sound going on. Remember, only one of them is the one that we're actually working with. However, this means that the lower level, it means less of the amount of modulation coming here, which actually changes the character of the sound, so I have to remember to put that back up, but I bring it down because it's kind of an obnoxious level. Suppose I could just do that. Yeah, I'm a smart person. All right. Back at Harbor 1. Let's turn off part B here. And turn off panning. Yay. Nothing terribly unexpected occurring in this particular harmer if you've seen any of the sounds I've ever done with harmer. I'm messing with all the special stuff like the unison pitch thickness is having its position modulated down on an envelope. I'm also modulating, I think, phaser width? Nope. Is the phaser doing anything at all? Nope, the phaser's just there. It's in harmonic mode, which means its position is being modulated by any change in pitch at a per harmonic basis. So when we modulate unison, we're actually changing that characteristic of the phaser as well as the actual pitch and the unison, the phase canceling, and all that fun stuff. On top of that, Here's my change in harmonic unison pitch. If you've never seen this particular graph before, what's happening is that this is changing this parameter, the amount of pitch separation of individual unison voices is changing that particular parameter on a per harmonic basis. So high harmonics or low harmonics can have different unison values, and then we're not talking about layering different sounds here. We're talking about in the same sound, the same stack can have. I mean, you can see it. This is what the graph's doing. It as well, because we're modulating in up and down. This is being applied to that modulation that gets applied to the phaser as a result of using harmonic mode. I have a little bit of inverse key tracking on, which means that the position of the phaser is going to go up a bit when it goes down in pitch, which is interesting. It's not going to move all that much because I don't have it on 100% strength in either direction. A little bit of speed engagement, but it's going in the opposite direction. But like the motion is not that important at this level because of all the crap we're going to do to the sound. Really, I wanted something interesting to mess with in the hardware stuff. And what I mean by interesting, I primarily mean something that would be really hard to generate in the analog world, something that's really like a digital thing. So that's why I wanted to make this using Harmor. This is pretty much the bleeding edge of digital processing in terms of like individual sound generation synthesis. Since we're just messing with the actual like molecular structure of what is a sound in a harmonic sense. Which is something hard. That's pretty hardcore. The hardcore digital, like you can, the math for that is just how the sounds of physics. You know, it's the physics of sound, but it's so kind of hard to do if you want to have 500 individual oscillators and some kind of analog synthesizer. Got the square side over here, which is just attenuating individual harmonics. These graphs, the timbre windows, are just the level of the harmonics engaged. This side, all of them on, means it'll generate a saw wave, because that's what a saw wave is, just all harmonics in the Fourier series. And the square side here is still the Fourier series, but every other one is off. Specifically, all the odd number ones are still on. And that's what gets you a square, the difference between a saw and a square in a harmonic sense. But I also have the Detune and the multiplier 2 here. What this guy does is it moves the harmonics up and down around, it multiplies them essentially from away from the fundamental. The fundamental being the root note of whatever you're playing. When you set it to 1, it's at whatever regular set is. So here's a saw set, which is way far away from where we are, right? If I go over here, now we're in a square set. But if I also did this, we'd also be in a square set. But there is a slight difference into how that, what that means in terms of what you're doing with the rest of the processing. Because one involves moving harmonics that are active into this position, and the other one involves turning off individual harmonics to only leave those remaining in that position. What that means is that things like settings for like this, like the pitch, like this graph represents the harmonic stack. This isn't frequency like in an EQ. We're not looking at hertz values here. We're looking at octaves. Each of these individual like the groups of the black bars here represent a separation in octaves of harmonics. So here's the fundamental, then the first harmonic, and then the middle one would be the second, and then the third, and then so on and so forth. Unlike this graph, which is set even distribution to individual harmonics. So you see here's the first one, the next octave has 2 harmonics, next one has 4 harmonics, 8, so on, double on, so forth. The last octave has half as many of the harmonics, but the reason why we look at it in this way is because most of the time, the reason why we don't look at it this way, this is hertz distribution, is because most of the musical things that we think about or care about, especially for bass production, mid-range bass production, happens kind of in the lower area, where in terms more nuancedly, I guess, than stuff in the higher frequencies most of the time. So that's why when we get more musical stuff, we get graphs like these, which is actually also how the display is showing it to us. This is what's even towards octaves, where now, like that's what I said before about that last octave having half of all the harmonics in the whole set is still true here. So that's up here. This is where the midway point of that old graph is. But that's way to hell there, because now we care more about what these individual harmonics in a very far away sense interact with each other. Just so you know how those graphs work. So anyway, but these changes that I made here on these octaves, if I multiply the detune, this is still the set, only now it's been amplified. So the whole thing is being pushed way the hell up more than that. But so it's not turning off individual harmonics, it's moving the whole thing up. So the settings you set for these individual harmonics are actually still in play now. They're not being taken away like they would have been if you did it with the square mode up here. This has subtle repercussions for things like if you're using unison that you like a particular like tone, especially in mid-range bassery. Then if you did this, it might screw the tone up a bit more than if you had gone to the square side, where it would still kind of sound like the tone you had, but it would feel like a square. In the case of this, I did both because I wanted to be even thinner, but I didn't like how it sounded when I went all the way up to multiplier 4, which is essentially what's happening when I go to Detune 2 and take away the square at the same time. That's the multiplier for what it sounded like. Just multiplier 2 sounds okay as well. It was a little too sharp for my tastes. Not that it really matters. I mean, I make a lot of these choices with all the kind of effects on and stuff like that, so it's not a whole lot of like, I care about how this sounds right now, because it's not going to sound a whole hell of a lot like this. Only, you know, sort of the suggestion of this guy's character is going to remain. Anyway, then there's the B part. The B part is actually kind of a crazy little bit of a tone all on its own. Let's actually re-engage panning here before I forget, so I can go here to disable this guy. Yeah. It's a whole bunch of noise, and here's the thing, I've never actually heard this sound. I've heard it a few times I've done this video and I made this point so far, but before I made this video, I hadn't heard what that sound actually sounded like, because it's going straight out to modulation, into what's happening inside all the module stuff. And so we're going to talk about that in a second. So like all the choices I made here are mostly about seeing what would happen when you used a really digital approach to creating pretty complex generations of sound, and applying that to modulating things on hardware. Because I realized that the strength of hardware is that it can do that. Is that it can take, like, you can take saw waves and square waves and do really basic stuff that sounds really dope when you do that, even to parameters that you aren't usually able to do that to in the digital world. But where that becomes cool is where you go farther than that, where you use shapes that aren't necessarily like just representations of basic shapes. So in this case, we have a whole bunch of crap going on and doing a bunch of interesting things. And of course, some regular shapes too. So that's what this sound is doing here. So we go re-engage this. Now it's going out together. Cool. Let's listen to what's going on into the modular stuff. And to do that, we're also going to explain. Okay. Oh yeah, turned you off. There you are. Oh, that's right. Yeah. I probably changed something, but whatever. It still sounds fine. Let's talk about the routing here. Inside Patcher, when you go to the inputs here in the audio, you have all the inserts inside FL. And so I just routed to go to the ones I needed to go to, insert 3 and 4 in this case. Insert 2 being where the analog in comes in, because, you know, that's what's happening. And then those are the ones I said to be the individual 8 outs the way they are. And then inside each citrus, I have more individual panning that I was doing like I was doing inside Harmor. So this first guy here, I have this waveform, and I think I'm doing some ring modulation. Yes, I am. So here's another approach of me trying to create kind of advanced modulation, and this is something that you could actually do pretty well inside the analog stuff. This sort of step removed of modulation of a modulation. You are essentially modulating the modulation, which is, you know, something that we're used to doing all the time inside, especially digital FM environments and like things like Citrus and FM8 and other complex things like that. But every additional step of modulation involves using an additional oscillator, so that means or a modulation source regardless. So that means you know, it can be expensive, which is sort of the bounty of the digital world, is that we can make clones and copies of anything and go on ad infinitum as far as our imagination lets us. So leveraging that also with the hardware is kind of where doing all of this digital synergy matters. That's what I got here. I put everything at ratio 1 here, at least the oscillators I'm actually using, because when we're using Harmor, it's at ratio 1, and the ratios actually are the same values, despite the fact that Citrus starts at ratio 2. I think that was just to make it doesn't go below ratio 1. You can't, actually, I guess you can go to 0 on Citrus, but when you do that, it just turns it off. And Harmor 1 is as low as you can go, and unless you use the divider. There's no divider inside Citrus, so they probably put it at number 2 just so that people would have an option to go immediately 1 octave lower with the ratio thingy if they felt like it, which I guess was a good call. So ring modulation is going up on there. So the ring modulation is an interesting thing. Let's actually. I guess we get the routing thing. We're gonna have to talk about the individual shapes when we talk about the individual actual modules, which we'll do in a second. This other guy here, we have the other cool thing, which is this DC offset. Inside Citrus, if you create a square wave and then go to the half mode, it plays half a square wave, which is just a set level. It's just on the whole time. When you put a note on there, it doesn't oscillate, it just sets a level. And if I were to say modulate the volume of that level, you would get a modulation that's in key with whatever you were just modulating it with the automation, essentially. And when we're talking about CV, that's essentially just what automation is. It's just a signal that is a position that the parameter follows and says, okay, cool, this is my position. So doing it like this and putting it out the ADATs, which go out my Expert Sleepers ES3, which I'll show you when we talk about the modules, I'm able to directly control modulation without any other step. I have other modules, like I have a USB enabled MIDI controller that just puts out signals like that. And there's also a plugin called Silent Way, which is like the software designed to go with the ES3. It does precisely this kind of stuff. However, just because I'm familiar with Citrus and FL in general, I just find doing this kind of thing easier. And also for fun stuff, like later I can modulate things with like other sources and things like that, which is a little bit easier to do than if I'm using a third-party generative source. Not that I'm doing that here with this DC offset, but I was with the other thing. You saw that. I showed you. Yeah, and number 2 is just another waveform being a waveform, just a pretty basic thing, like just a saw wave. This guy's at ratio 2, which I guess means I was trying to be clever about it. Neat. All right, so now we're going to look at the module stuff. Now this is cool. This is what I was going to talk about what's going on with the camera stuff. And what's going on is I have the camera, my GoPro, on an arm. The same arm actually that we're looking at that has my microphone on it now has the camera, which means I can do this. Yep. So I have two arms that you can look at this up here. Oh, there's its own arm. It's so weird. And I could basically just I can have whatever angle I need for whatever I'm doing at a time, which is awesome because I just want to be able to just do what I want to do at any given moment. And here's the other arm for the microphone. And here's the whole setup with the monitor that I do most of the stuff on. And here's we should probably be looking at this camera here. Is this the right one? Yes, it is. What's interesting is that the GoPro's upside down actually right now because the mounting is on the bottom of it, and it's going down like kind of like this guy is. The camera's doing the same thing. I have a mount for it. So when we go over to the module stuff, it'll flip over the upside down, and I'll use the upside down layout, which I am triggering from XSplit from the primary monitor on the actual Blade Pro, upon which everything is being done all at once, which is pretty neat. So let's actually get to do module stuff. I'm going to flip you around. Whip. And we're just going to... Oh, look at that. There it is. I've only got half the rig up because I was doing other stuff with the other stuff. And I can just bring it down. And over and down. And now we can look at what the hell ever we need to look at any given moment. This is going to be really good when I do eventually bring back live streams. Yep. Awesome. So this is the Expert Sleepers ES3, laden all sorts of ways with cableage. Let's go back into FL a second so we can reroute all the business. Oh, it's showing it upside down. I guess it doesn't matter from that angle. Oh, really? Okay. You're the right level. You can be as loud as you want, I guess. All right, let's turn off the effects. So I guess also it's probably prudent to mention that a lot of the decisions that I make with the module stuff I made with these effects on at some point. Like I made it sound a certain way before I got here. Then I was like, okay, cool. Now I'm going to EQ compress it, and then I just tweak things forever, especially from like earlier parts of the chain because you get dramatic changes and things. So a lot about like the way they sound like in order like this isn't like the goal I had in mind, which gets a lot of people because a lot of people. I mean, you watch me like reverse engineer stuff, and that's fine and dandy. But for like original production, it's less of a thing I'm doing in mind. More than it is that like I'm just trying a particular process, and whatever sound happens to come of it happens to come of it. And it's like in the moment, I'll have individual whims as to where that goes, which could be good or bad depending on particular direction. Anyway, weep. Let's talk about the outputs here. So we have ADAT 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and up in here, I'm going to, okay, let me quickly review my chain. Derp. So the main channel goes into Torcido, and the first modulation also goes to the Torcido. Yeah. No? Nope, that's 1. Yes, 2 does. And 2 and 3. That's nice. Okay. So that's handy. So that means that B here goes to, I could switch back to modules. Yay. All right. I guess you remember what it looks like in FL. So here's output number 1, right? Here's the actual sound that is Harmer. It's just so cool. This is going into the Torcido, which is a distortion unit from the Roland Aria series. It's pretty straightforward. It has a tone mode, which I'm pretty sure is kind of crossfaded between different wave shaping types, just different distortion, whatever. And over here is just the distortion dist mode, which I guess is just gain. And they both have input modulation, which is done by the CV into these attenuators. And that's what these are called when they're used in this kind of stuff. In an electrical sense, they're called attenuators because they are attenuating the signal's strength, amplitude, I guess. Level, whatever. It says level 2, so whatever. Call them level. I call them that just because they're all going to be everything. This is a niche enough market and modular stuff that everything is going to have, I guess, their own way of calling stuff. But they attenuate, is what I'm saying. So here's our actual main input, right? So here's number 2. This is the B part of harmonic going into the tone mode. So this guy is modulating this particular parameter at the rate of the output waveform of what the B part in harmonic generated. And then over here is the first Citrus's part, which is, just to refresh my memory. Oh yes, the FM guy, the RM guy. So let's talk about those two dudes. I'm just gonna turn them off a bit. And I guess I can also turn, okay, I'm going to turn down the wet on the reverb because it goes with the reverb after that. It goes with the filter. Filter's being modulated too, but we'll talk about that individually because it's pretty obvious. It's on top of everything. Yeah, how much closer can I get that? Quite a bit if I wasn't stuck. Maybe not. This is a bit of an experiment for me. I appreciate y'all being involved. Oh, it's kind of a random moment. There's absolutely no reason to mention this right now, but just because I remember doing it. I'm a Splice Sounds affiliate now. If you would like to go sign up for Splice, because Splice is pretty cool. Not gonna lie, like, I'm not a big guy in terms of like using samples. I make a lot of samples. I actually have sample packs up on Splice. I support that model. I think it's pretty great. And if you sign up with a code linked in the description of this video, you actually get a month free. So please sign up. It's pretty great. Anyway, back at this. So here we got the sound. I turned off both attenuators, so that means that they're not being modulated right now. And we play that. So listen to what this knob does. Basically like a dark, bright knob, right? So now this is the signal coming out of the B part, so listen to what happens when I'm moving around with this level knob. Ready? I'm gonna put that back. Now listen what happens when I move around this level knob. Actually, I'm gonna do one more thing. Inside FL, I might as well just show you this. I'm going to disable the ring modulation oscillator on that output on this waveform. This waveform I chose just by playing around with it. Along with playing along with it, if you mess around, remember this represents essentially the level of the parameter that we're moving with, along much like the DC offset that we made, where just level output. This is the parameter is going to move in this particular shape. If you mess around with the level of it coming out, that means that the intensity at which it moves will be a lot like moving around this knob. So if we liked what this sounded like with this knob modulation, then we might think, oh cool, it'd be kind of nice to modulate it automatically. But this goes a little bit step further when we're modulating it with ring modulation, which is specifically modulating the volume of the waveform. So that means it's as if we were whipping around this knob at audio rate modulation. So we're doing that digitally in here. This actually has nothing to do with what's happening inside the actual module. This is something that we're creating within the waveform here. On top of that, am I modulating volume of any of this in here? I'm automating something out there. Oh yeah, that's the offset from later. Yeah. So yes, that's what's going on in the Torcido. So next step, back to the modular side of things. It goes out of the Torcido with this cable here into the Reverb. Let's all go to the Reverb. Oh, we can get right up in there. You might even actually be able to read what the parameters say. That's so cool. This is a huge cable in the way. That's just the output. Yep. You know what? Aha! Success. And I should get one of those like hip hop like ring lights, hip hop music video ring lights. So it's everything is perfect always in terms of like coming straight out of this camera. Although I guess it'll look crazy when it's on my face. Anyway, reverb. Here's the wet dry mix. I have it all the way off. Let's mess around with that a bit. So in here, we have the main thing coming in, and it comes in, and it goes out of here, which is going to the filter, and more things are happening, but the two things that are coming in to be modulated are this, the absorb knob, and this, the size knob. So the size knob is actually what the offset is modulating. Normally, I would FM this parameter, and by normally, I mean like the most times that I mess around with this particular thing, actually just make sure that I'm right here. This is out, that's 5 and 6, so that makes this, yep, this is the offset. So, what that means is that instead of this not being FM'd, it's being modulated, like positioned, like straight position. And this knob is determining the like the intensity of it. This is also an attenuator, or well, actually what's referred to as is an attenuverter, because it can also be a phase inverter. The center position is actually off, and there's a positive and negative in the parameters motion. This is a little bit like the positive negative modulation in knobs that you would see inside Harmor or Citrus or anything in FL or the DAWs for that matter. It's a fairly common thingy. Much like the attenuator when we saw the level things. The difference between them is that the level ones up on the Torcido, which we can just go to. Wow, we could have gotten a lot closer. Damn. The level ones that we see on the Torcido are 0 to 100. Directly all the way over is 0. Let's actually put some of that back up on there because we're doing stuff with it now. Yeah. The levels up there are 0 to 100, whereas the levels on this guy are negative 100 to 100. Now it should sound a little bit more like the sound. There it is, yeah. Let's actually bring some of that back up, because now it's kind of quiet. Well, it gets all compressed and stuff later. Yep, so the absorb knob up here, what this does, see there's decay like on a regular reverb. This is actually a fairly familiar sort of digital reverb setup. If you've ever used like a Valhalla reverb or something like that, this is pretty regular stuff. If you got a size knob for everything up going on, this is a speed knob for this guy's modulation. It's basically modulating the position of this guy according to this dude, and then this dude also sets modulation depth in the signal, but there's two kinds of modulation. There's regular old modulation, and then there's bucket brigade, I forget, whatever they call it, refer to it as shimmer, which is like, well, it makes it sound like shimmer. And then over here is just a tilt knob. This is kind of like the color knob inside Delay 3 in FL's 12.5, where it just is brighter up here and darker down here. It's basic kind of filter sort of thing. Only it's a little bit more unpredictable than that in terms of like how the sound behaves. There's a pre-delay, which is cool because you modulate this in real time. It gets like thrown around snappy. And then there's the decay knob, which is just how long the reflections take. And then there's absorb. Now, when you use short amounts of stuff, like we are right now, let's actually just take off the desorb modulation. The desorb modulation. It gets very like phaser-like because I have almost no decay, and the size is pretty small. Let's make it a little bit smaller to kind of illustrate the point. And the absorb knob, what we'll do when it's not being modulated is that it will kind of cloud things up. It doesn't necessarily lengthen the decay or increase the size, but it does blur it right the hell up. And that's pretty neat. However, it blurs it right the hell up. And I don't really want it to be that blurry. And the thing is that all this stuff takes a little bit of processing time, and it doesn't always mix well with the original dry signal phase wise. So to get like the best results, I like to be the real just the reverb coming out of it, just so that when I process that signal, I can make it as sharp as I want. I'll tell you about how to do that in a second. But one of the ways to do that is that I modulate the absorb knob coming out of here. Now this knob does not have an attenuator or an attenuator. It's just a straight up. It's just straight. And I have to imagine that means that all the way up and all the way down is all the way up and all the way down. I'm really kind of unclear as to the impact that it's having in terms of the specific motion of the parameter, but it does increase the cloudiness without it being that sort of cloudy sounding. And this is what, number 4. So that means that's the second guy coming in here, and that's the saw wavy looking kind of guy. Let's go back in here and show you the shape. This is that guy's modulation. Am I modulating this dude either? Nope. That's coming out like that straight. Although I have brought it down just a little bit. So I think what this is doing is it's turning it on a bit and turning it off like this, but slowly. So this is what's cool about having the volume control out here, because this controlling the volume from the source is attenuating it. This is an attenuator. Actually, it's an attenuverter because its center is 50%. So that means 100%, negative 100%. So even though I didn't want to go all the way up. So even though the absorb knob on the Reverb does not have an attenuverter, we can still act like it inside Citrus. Another plus to digital hardware synergy. Although this is a digital module. It's a reverb. Yeah. This guy is being... Oh yeah, let's go back into FL. So that one's volume is being modulated. That took way too long. And I'm messing around with that. That one automation handle we see coming out there is the volume of this operator. And it is the one automation clip. Actually, there's one automation clip. Oh, the phaser width. Look at that. I'm modulating the phaser width of the Harmer. Because of course I am. It sounds pretty dope when you do. Actually, if you put like a saw wave and then a phaser, and then you modulate the phaser parameters to kind of widen or shorten the distance of the phaser, you put that in a vocoder, you get a lot of like early growl kinds of sounds, like snailsy, skrillexies kinds of stuff, because the modulation of the width of the holes in the spectrum gets us a talky, formaty sound, which is why I do it. It sounds great. Yeah. The phaser inside Harmer is pretty ridiculous in terms of the range, which is why sometimes I'll mess around with the actual automation's distance so that my modulation of it will be a little bit in control. And even here, you see that the modulation is slight. It's because the position that it's in was pretty good in this kind of range, but the modulation is quite impactful. If I really cared, I would macro this up to something that acts so that I could modulate the full size without having to worry about like disturbing the tonality of everything. But this was a very, I wing things. I don't think that far ahead of stuff when I'm doing things. Cools. Let's back to this dude coming out of the Harmer, out of the Reverb, being modulated by these two dudes. Yep, cool. We're going into the Korgasmatron 2. It is a dual filter of which I am using one. It's coming out of the, I just call it Harmer again in my mind, into the input here. So this is input A, and then I have input B, and I have out B, and this is what's going into input 1 back into FL, what we're hearing right now. Which I can actually show you what that looks like. I can show you what that looks like, yeah. So if I do it like this, is this going to work? It's upside down. I guess I can just, yeah, prepared. There's the Blade Pro again. Anyway, so here, this is a patch bay I got from Behringer. It's just got a bunch of 1/4-inch little dingers in here so that I can patch in any of these individual 1/4-inch cables, because it is just audio when it comes out of the thing. Like the only thing that you really need to worry about is in terms of it putting in more power that a particular input can handle. But most of the time, regular audio is all right, and there's more danger than that I probably should be talking about, and I probably should know about. I should probably know the importance of DC coupling versus not DC coupling, but it's also important to note that none of the outputs are actually coming out of anything to do with this, which is really the real danger. The outputs, like the outputs of the synth can go into whatever kind of input that you want to have. You can tell when it's peaking, you can handle that, but coming out of things is where stuff can be a problem. But that I'm avoiding by using the ES3 to be my main output, that I'm ADATing actually out of the back of the 802, which is this cable here. This guy, hairy arm. Here's the cables coming from my mic that I'm using right now. This guy, phantom power coming out of input 9. This is input 1. We'll get back into input 1 because we're using it. Derp. All right, let's go back into flipping you around. Oh yeah, that worked out well. I'm loving this camera setup. I'll tell you what. Oh, am I upside down? I am. I suppose it doesn't matter if it was upside down. We'll find out why I did this in a second. In that this works coming back on whatever. Okay, point being, input, it's all kind of good. So right here we have another attenuverter coming into the FM2 input, which is this guy, which is the last guy, I want to say? Yeah, number 6. And this is the dude that's just a normal triangle wave. And at least I think he's normal. I don't believe I'm modulating him any differently past that. Nope, that's just all it is. Yeah, so the dude there, Mr. Dude Man, right, is modulating essentially the cutoff position of the main filter, which is just, being a filter. all the way on like that, I am not a particular fan of how smooth it is. I want some of that bite back, right? So the way it's doing it right now is that it's modulating it positive first and then negative afterwards. So we get it's all the way up there and it's not coming down. It's not biting far enough. But if you bring it down a little bit, it goes up and down. It's essentially like a bipolar modulation onto one of the serum modules if you linked it to this outside source. And then this is the matrix attenuator, essentially saying how far or wide it is, or that the regular low gravity thing. That's actually how it works in the real world. So it's not bad at all that Massive and Serum adopted that as a modulation linkage. So here, this guy is essentially the amount of it, and it's very kind of slight, right? Because here it is all the way up. Kind of like how that sounds. So you see how like when I was all the way up there, it was still pretty smooth because it couldn't go up any higher as high as it went down. So it wasn't like as bitey. But when you bring it down, it gives it room to bite, and boy, can it if you let it with the modulation of that particular parameter. I leave it static though because what really is that like I've created all this character with the distortion and the reverb that it smoothed it out enough, and I wanted to have some of the bite back, so we're kind of forcing the bite in the high end with the filter, and that's really all it's doing. And then it's going out with this big guy here into input 1, and then we go back into FL proper, where is Modulated, processed even with some stuff. I got the delay 3, and I really like the delay 3. It works a lot like a lot of the stuff that we just used. In fact, modulating the time parameter with the tempo sync off, with even the built-in modulation, which I'm using here, just to have the rate is slow, but the time movement is pretty, a little bit big. It sounds a lot like what it sounds like when you move the size knob of the reverb. It's more or less a similar concept. But what I'm doing here is I'm using this to create stereo, and the diffusion works very well. It's extremely diffuse. The stereo mode offset, like there's more than one kind, and they're very well balanced algorithms doing that kind of stuff. I'm not totally sure what's up with it. A lot of this is still kind of a new plugin to me, but it was pretty easy to get a pretty balanced stereo image out of this in terms of just my particular feeling of it. Here's that tone knob I was talking about. That's very similar to the tilt knob on that plugin. And the plugin, it's not a plugin. The freaking Reverb from Make Noise. Jeez. Anyway, then EQ is EQ, but this EQ is something that I used when I was compressing the crap out of it, which is a bit of an interesting thing to do because it's actually a bit damaging in the kind of like highfalutin caring about your engineering kind of way. Because an EQ, what it's doing is that, like, considering that we're doing this to, hardware processed sound, so we're getting ADDA to get to make all this processing happening. So most people will probably want to preserve the phase profile of the sound they're generating as much as possible. I personally don't give a shit, but I just want you to know that the way that what I'm doing here is obliterating the phase profile like hardcore. Granted, I like how it sounds, but I know what's happening when I make these like really steep modes in the filters and just push them like really far down. I'm not boosting much, as you can tell, but I'm still making some pretty harsh cuts. And the way that I'm compressing things and the way the splits are going, and that I'm not using the more linear phase filters, I'm ruining it pretty epically. But it sounds good. It's just that, like, I'm just saying that can sound good. Like, it's not like necessarily always a bad thing, but some people have the thought that I do that kind of stuff, and I don't know that I do that. I do know that. It's fine though. On the master channel though, I'm not doing much of a lot. Like, I have a little bit of attack on the actual main side of it, and on the LMH delay, which is the same kind of attack. And then the release is pretty high. I really wasn't in the business of crushing the sound over much because it was pretty solid anyway. You can see coming out of it. So it's pretty on point with a little bit of that in terms of the outputs of the multiband. Like, the multiband is what's doing the compression. You see I'm also messing a bit with stereo processing, which I did before the compression. The delay is before the compression because I like how that gets. I really enjoy how Reverb reacts with stuff when you compress it. It behaves interestingly, and it's a pretty good way to add whip to anything, or reverb delay, any of that stuff. And then yeah, that's the sound. If you have any questions about this, please let me know. Don't forget to check out in the description of my video a link to some pretty neat stuff by Razer, but also a link to a code to a free month trial of Splice Sounds. If you have any questions about that, let me know. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe, all that good stuff. And as usual, have a nice day.